Good afternoon and welcome. My name's Kevin Igoe, Managing Director of Professional Fee Protection, and I'm pleased to be introducing today two special guests we have to present today's webinar to you. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mark Taylor, who's Tax Investigations Partner at Buzzacott. So Mark, perhaps you can say hello and a little bit about your background.
Hello everybody. As Kevin indicated, I'm the head of the tax investigations team at Buzzacott. We're currently the esteemed winners of the Solid Taxation Awards Best Tax Investigations Team. I'm entering my 13th year in professional practice. Prior to that, I served 20 years in HM Revenue and Customs and served in all their elite investigation offices.
Okay, thanks very much. Now, throughout the course of the webinar, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free, or even comments, please feel free to put them in the usual way, and we'll get through as many as we can. Those of you who remember Mark from before know that he does like the trickier, thornier questions, so the more difficult you can make them for him, the better he'll feel about himself. We will be sending a copy of the slides afterwards, so please don't worry about that. So what we're going to do today is rather unusual for us. We're going to actually do a case study of a tax investigation case. So we've entitled it A Living Hell. Well, I think we'll leave that up to you to make your own decisions before the webinar finishes. We do have a client with us today. Now, the client is going to obviously remain anonymous. We'll call him Andy for the sake of this. If anyone has any alternative names, feel free to suggest them and we'll use them as we go along. So without further ado, Mark.
Okay, so just before I begin, Andy, do you want to just say a bit about the industry that you're in and just to sort of help viewers understand a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I run a restaurant, busy restaurant in central London. I opened it, well, over 15 years ago. And I really love what I do. It's something I put my heart and soul into. We've got lots and lots of regulars, and proud to be a central part of the neighbourhood that we operate in.
Okay, thank you. So this. You remember this?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so
already.
Yeah, I did my best trying to get a photo with somebody as good looking as you. But you were called, it was the 23rd of April, 2016, so St. George's Day to a number of us. And you started your day, I think you said, about 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, probably 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, yeah.
So what, prepping for the day?
Yeah, getting ready for the day. Busy Saturday. And
then in around about, you managed to sneak away from the restaurant a bit early, which was what time?
It could have been 8, 9 p.m.
Okay, and you're at home, relaxing on the sofa, drinking wine with your girlfriend, correct?
Exactly.
And then the phone rings.
Exactly.
So do you want to tell our listeners what that call was?
Yeah, well, so I'm on the sofa watching TV with my girlfriend. The phone rings. It's my manager saying, you've got to come down. There's 5 guys from HMRC are here. They want to do an inspection.
Do you remember what sort of time that was?
Oh, that was 11 p.m.
Okay, so what did you do?
Well, it took a moment to digest it. I was just thinking, 5 guys, 11 o'clock Saturday night. It must, I'd never heard of anything like it. I thought it must be some kind of I just thought it must be some kind of scam. I thought it must be 5 gangsters, about to do something. I didn't know what.
So you got in your car?
So I ran down to the business.
Okay. Yeah. And at the time, had you hadn't heard, because effectively this was an HMRC unannounced visit.
Yeah, I'd never heard of anything like that. We'd had HMRC visits before, but they'd always just made an appointment, and we knew to expect them.
Okay. And would it be clear in terms of what their motive was when they were there?
No, I had absolutely no idea. When I got there, sure enough, there were 5 guys from HMRC behaving, a little bit like policemen, and They did show me identification. They did.
I'll come on to this. So what we've got here for viewers is this is the actual notice. Obviously, it's been anonymised, but this is the notice that you were served on that day, along with a number of other documents. You said they did show you identification.
They flashed me some badges.
Right. Okay. And did they? And you said there was 5 officers there. I mean,
Yeah.
is your establishment, is that sort of proportionate to the size of your establishment?
No, we're a humble little restaurant. But
did you feel intimidated?
I certainly did.
And business hours, because one of the things it says on this notice that they are to visit usually within business hours. Business hours, is that 11 o'clock at night for you?
So 11 o'clock is when we close. So.
And can I ask what time did the inspection finish?
About 3 in the morning.
So they're there for 4 hours.
Yeah.
What happened in that 4 hours?
Asking lots of questions, wanting a tour of the premises, asking different staff different questions, getting us to stand in different parts of the room, wanting to watch my manager do the cash up.
And were these actions, were you directed to do that? Was HMRC leading this? So were you conforming to their instructions?
Yeah. They were asking us questions. We were answering everything they asked. We were showing them whatever they wanted to see. We were doing whatever they wanted us to do.
Did they interview your staff?
I think they were interviewing. They were talking to different members of staff, so I couldn't remember what was happening in different parts of the room, but they seemed to be talking to different members of staff. Yeah.
Were you present when they were talking to your staff?
No, not always.
Okay.
No.
Did they remove records?
They did. Yeah.
Okay.
They took several files. They downloaded till data. They downloaded data from a back office computer.
So thorough examination.
It felt a touch random. It's hard to describe it. I mean, it felt smash and grab without the smash. It felt like they were grabbing at certain things. Sometimes I felt like it wasn't necessarily the stuff that was relevant, but on the other hand, I didn't know what they were really looking for. I was still struggling to really understand, comprehend what it was all about. I thought they must have made some mistake. They must have the wrong address, because it just felt like it transpired they'd come down from the Midlands for this visit.
Lincoln. It was.
Just the fact that there were 5 of them, the fact that it was 11 o'clock, it was really all a bit
surreal.
It was a bit surreal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, there was some issues, and so today is not about us condoning anything. It's acknowledgement there were some issues.
Yeah.
And do you just briefly want to explain how those arose and what happened?
You mean how what the issues were?
Yeah. Just
Well, just briefly. You know, I work in an industry where it's not uncommon for restaurants to declare only a small proportion of their sales. That was never my case. In fact, I used to feel like, I used to feel a little bit naive for running my business kind of 100% above board. And so it was nearly maybe after 10 years or so that we started diverting just a little bit of cash away from the till. When I say a little, I mean not even 1%. We used it mostly for a cash bonus scheme. You know, if we hit a certain number of covers, I'd put a certain amount in the tip spot. Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
that's roughly it.
But there were also,
so it's a small amount, but I guess it was over.
Which we don't condone, but
no.
But in proportion to the overall scheme of what was going through the till, it was about 1%. Well, it was about 1%. The other thing as well, which was highly unusual in this case, was that you also, as a reward, didn't just take cash from the till as has been explained, but you also put in your own personal cash into this.
I did, because I was nervous doing it, and I never wanted it to exceed, I don't know, what felt comfortable to me. So the small amounts that I was doing, or what seemed like small amounts to me, if they felt uncomfortable, I would get extra cash out from my own bank account out of the wall to do what I was doing, which was this cash bonus scheme.
Okay.
And just little bits of cash. I mean, in effect, I saw it as pocket change to kind of oil the wheels of the business, you know. And in a fast-moving business where you have staff coming and going, sometimes you need 50 quid, 20 quid, 80 quid. Sometimes you just need these amounts to remunerate or to incentivize or to give bonuses or to do that kind of thing. So
Okay.
not condoning it, but that's kind of it became a small habit.
So this was the Saturday. The Monday, you're in to see your accountant, and you explained to your accountant what happened or what had been occurring in the establishment.
Yeah, because
and what we've got so listeners can see is this is email confirmation that I had from your accountant confirming what the visit that you made. Hopefully, if viewers can't see this, I'll happily read it out, Kevin. But essentially, you've gone in, you've told the accountant exactly what's going on. The accountant says to you, "I'll get a specialist," because what do you want to do? Because you were looking to make a disclosure.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point I was scared, because I thought that even though it's a relatively small thing, and it was never intended as a tax dodge, the thing is I'd never really made any efforts to hide it. And so when they visited, I thought that they're probably going to have questions around what they find, and I just thought I'd preempt it and help out. And so I thought, no, I have to. I just
do the right thing.
Want to disclose. I just want to do the right thing and just say, oh my God, I've been doing this. I thought it wasn't a big deal, but just in case it is a big deal, I better just put my cards on the table and just say, listen, this is what I've done. It's only a small thing, but I've done it, and here you go.
Okay. So, but you didn't wait for the specialist advisor, did you?
No.
So what you actually did was you contacted HMRC yourself on the 29th of April. So 4 days later, you're itching almost to tell HMRC. You've contacted the officer direct. You've told the officer that clearly that there's going to be a disclosure in relation to undeclared income. So did you receive any response from HMRC in relation to that email? Even acknowledgement, or if you wish to make a disclosure, for example, please use Code of Practice 9 given it's undeclared income?
I think I just received a thank you for your email.
Okay. All right. Then what's then happened is 6 days later, you make a disclosure.
That's right.
And whilst we haven't got that disclosure, this was the covering email. That disclosure was 5 pages. And I have to say, it's probably one of the most emotive pieces of literature I've seen. I mean, to the point where I would say you look mentally on the edge.
Right.
Do you recall the?
It's funny that you say that. Maybe I should reread it now, because it must have been very emotional, but at the same time, I remember trying to not make it emotional and trying to just be factual and just say, listen, this is what's been going on, and but clearly the emotions came through.
Okay, but you told in that disclosure it was a full disclosure, albeit there wasn't precision with regards to figures. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that would be accurate. It was it described everything that had happened to the best of my. It described everything that had happened with my best estimates as to the numbers.
Okay.
So we have a question from Chris here. Andy, did that any exchange at any stage explain your rights when they turned up to visit?
No, they did not. No, because in hindsight, I've learned that you know, apparently I could have said no, I don't want to go ahead with this visit. You know, make an appointment and come back. I had no idea of that. They just presented me with the that letter, which was about 7 pages long with all the small print, which I'm trying to read, but my emotions are flying high, so I couldn't make much sense of. I just have to reread every little sentence.
But by the time you got there, they'd already started.
It already started anyway. I just assumed that I didn't have any choice in the matter, and that I had to just comply.
So before you made your disclosure, did your acting accountant explain to you or suggest to you didn't make a disclosure?
Yes, he did.
But you just felt mentally pressured to do so?
He suggested that I should wait and see, that I should you know, talk to more people before, or I should see what questions HMRC have. But at this point, I just felt they're going to have questions. There will be a couple of things that look odd, and yeah, in hindsight, I wish I had waited. I wish I had spoken to other people. I wish I hadn't been so keen to help, to do what I thought was helping.
So immediately you got an acknowledgement back from HMRC, obviously out on their phones, no doubt probably another unannounced visit, but here they are acknowledging your disclosure.
Right.
Then that actual same day or later that day, you got coincidentally you got an arrival of an inquiry notice, and here's the actual opening letter that you received. Now, you subsequently arranged for records to be collected.
That's right.
You contacted the officer that was handling your case, the very lady that you made the disclosure to.
That's right.
Would it be fair to say that you were fully engaged in the process, cooperating?
Oh, completely. Yeah, completely. As promptly as I could, as fully as I could. Yeah.
Okay. And you didn't, and after this, you didn't hear anything from HMRC for 6 months.
That's right. Nothing after that.
And there was no indication that this case had changed, or that in terms of that it wasn't being handled civilly.
No. After this notice, we arranged over the phone for me to have records collected. So I prepared about 4 or 5 boxes of files, and which were collected a week or 2 after this. And then, yeah, nothing for 6 months or so.
Okay. Then you got a visit.
And then I got a visit again in the evening. Yeah, Friday evening around 6 or 7 p.m.
And this is the very letter that you got.
That brings back memories. Yeah, hand-delivered letter. Yeah.
Informing you that you were now under criminal investigation, telling you to turn up for a caution interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you feel? Silly question, but how did you feel receiving that?
I remember when I got this letter, I really couldn't comprehend it. I just carried on doing what I was doing for half an hour or so. I thought I was staying calm, but my team could see I was a bit agitated, and were asking me if everything was okay. But I honestly didn't know what it meant. It was so far out of my frame of reference. You know, criminal prosecution. I just there was a lot to digest, to understand. It sounds basic, but I'd never really faced those words, so I didn't even know if this meant just money, if this, I just didn't know what it all meant. So it was taking a lot to sink in. I think I had to go home quickly and start Googling stuff, which is probably the worst possible thing you can do. It's a bit like Googling your symptoms when you're not feeling well and you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to die.
So you went, so after receiving this though, you then decided that you obviously needed help over and above your accountant.
Yeah.
You saw a number of lawyers.
So yeah, so at this point I just started Googling tax lawyers and making calls and seeing how much information I can get over the phone, or how much information, I go to introductory meetings with half a dozen lawyers that I believe, because it's all getting very technical at this point. So I'm meeting with lawyers who I think are somewhat specialized in this field, and just trying to.
And what did they say to you in terms of outcome?
I was asking each one of them, describe the situation, and at the end of the 1 hour meetings, I would ask them, what's the likely outcome, and I was getting a fairly consistent answer, which was, you're probably a 50-50 likelihood of doing a custodial sentence.
You came and saw me.
So that was a very, very surreal week. I
Yeah.
remember walking around central London, meeting these lawyers, wondering how it had come to this. And then thankfully through a contact, he suggested that actually I didn't need just a lawyer. I needed a forensic accountant working together with a lawyer. And that's where he put me in touch with somebody he knew, which was you.
Do you remember our first meeting?
I do remember it well, and it was a completely different experience to, without wanting to
massage
you, but with the other meetings, I really did feel like a sausage in a sausage factory. I was trying to use my best instincts to work out whether these lawyers who were coming across as lawyers do, whether they had my best interests at heart or whether they were just trying to process me quickly. It didn't feel like it really didn't feel like they cared much. So when I met with you, it did feel like a completely different scenario, because you took a long time. You took your time to really get under the skin of the situation and try to work out reasons why this should not be a criminal case. And so that was a completely fresh approach for me, and I started to feel reassured.
We formed a strategy, and so we didn't have long to work, but we came together so when you attended the interview, your caution interview on the 19th of December 16.
Yeah, because it's worth saying that while I was meeting all those lawyers during that week, I was under massive pressure to organize something as quickly as possible, because HMRC were waiting or were trying to arrange a date within the coming weeks to interview me under caution. Again, I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I had to I had to get ready for that somehow. So when I met with you and we came up with a strategy, we realized there was quite a lot of work. There was a lot of work to do before that meeting.
So we prepared a report. Essentially, the report was akin to a Code of Practice 9 report, where we, in a very short space of time, we identified what the irregularities were, what happened, how it had happened, the amount, estimations of the amount we believed that was involved. The tax that we got was for across all disciplines was just over £32,000. We arranged for that to be paid the next day to HMRC, and obviously that report was delivered to HMRC at the caution interview.
That's right.
And can you remember the reaction of the HMRC officers on being presented that report?
They weren't too reactive, but I'm guessing they were surprised.
We then moved on to do a second report, and that second report actually looked at your private side, where we actually forensically looked at whether or not you had benefited yourself from the irregularities. And what we actually found was cash being regularly withdrawn, very close to, by cash points, very close, if not in the same street,
from my personal bank accounts.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which then funded the float for the staff, for the tips.
Yeah. Those reports really just laid it all out on the table from a forensic accountant's point of view of everything that had happened, and the scope and breadth and depth of all of it.
Yeah. Okay. So this was, so the last report they had was April 17. Obviously, first caution interview was December 16, and you hear nothing.
Nothing.
1st of October 18, you received this letter, which I remember you saying to me, Mark, I think this is good news.
Right.
And what was quite interesting in this, apologies if people can't necessarily read the text, but this is the decision by the CPS with regard to your case, and when a case gets referred up by a criminal officer, it has to be looked at by a lawyer at the CPS. The CPS then make a decision. Is either, and if they say no, they say no for two grounds. One, that it's the bottom one, which is further action and it's not in the public interest, which, to be honest, that's the one that we were pursuing, because we were saying, here is a man who's made a full disclosure to HMRC. Prosecuting man for the amount of money involved is not proportionate, and prosecuting somebody for coming forward to make a disclosure is not, dare I say it, helpful for the disclosure process. So we were expecting the bottom one to be ticked, but they actually ticked to say that the evidence did not meet the evidential standard, which we hadn't necessarily believed was going to come. So how did you feel receiving this?
Yeah, I remember saying I think it's good news. Again, I was trying to, it says letter template at the top. I couldn't quite, it was still all a little bit surreal. It had been so long. It had been 2.5 years. The whole thing had been going on at this point. A year and a half since HMRC had kind of, it felt, casually referred the case on to the CPS, and so I think I was starting to feel relief. I thought, okay, this must be good news. I had so much other stuff that was going on in my life at this point that
I mean, how did you cope within that period of that 18 months waiting to hear? In terms of your business, and dare I pry your relationship?
It definitely got its tentacles into other aspects of my life. It was a challenging couple of years from several points of view, but I think it was made all the more challenging just because of this underlying thing that was going on with HMRC. It was like a little cloud that was following me around. I'd not really anticipated I expected pressure, and I expected there to be a case to answer, but I didn't expect all the distortion, all the amplification, all the errors, I felt like I was kind of wading through treacle in terms of trying to deal with this impenetrable, huge organization that seemed so disconnected. I felt heavily dependent on you. Massively.
I remember the phone calls.
Because Mark, before we go on that, do you think HMRC had any idea of quantum of tax before they started threatening with legal proceedings?
Yes, it would have been quite easy, Kevin, based on whilst the disclosure letter that went in May didn't quantify to the penny the amounts involved. It was very clear to work out from that just what an estimation of what the tax was. I mean, to be honest, when Andy came to see me, I worked out the tax there and then within 5 minutes.
So give listeners some idea of quantum. Can you do that?
Yeah, what
made them launch this criminal proceedings?
Easy number. I mean, he put himself at risk purely because at that particular time, HMRC were under pressure to hit 1,000 prosecutions a year. As simple as that.
I made myself a soft target. I think I was low-hanging fruit at this point because my disclosure was basically an admission. So even though the numbers were relatively small, I think they saw it as an easy win.
I mean, that's generally the people who get picked on, unfortunately, isn't it? The low hanging. But I mean, I think for purposes of our listeners, because it's a common misconception, I think, that they're looking at tax of hundreds of thousands before they prosecute.
No. I mean, obviously, speaking from an ex-criminal perspective here, I can roll 5 cases of this nature within a year very quickly, compared to 3 years for somebody that's the top of the tree. So the fact that Andy's called himself low-hanging fruit, that is spot on, and that definitely was the case. They would have easily been able to work out what the quantum was.
So, like I said, who attended the caution interview with the client? Was it just you, or did you?
No, we paired up with it was Byrne & Partners solicitors. I'll happily mention their names, and it really was a team effort. The issue that there is that an officer can allow an accountant to sit in, but they can at any time an accountant. I'm not a qualified lawyer, Kevin, so I can't. Whilst I can sit in, I can't give advice to that client. And he needed a lawyer, but obviously with our support.
Yeah. So the lesson there for our listeners is, if you get in that situation, go with a lawyer. Do not go on your own.
Yeah. I mean, there is no way to go to a caution interview on your own.
I mean, with just an accountant.
Yeah, well, and with an accountant. I mean, from an ex-criminal perspective, if I've got an accountant coming in to a criminal interview, I'm licking my lips. The only thing to say, actually, that within the 18 months was that there was VAT assessments that were issued on the 13th of February 18, but that was done purely for protective reasons, as that was explained, because of the 12-month rule of evidential fact. But interestingly, no direct tax protective assessments or determinations were raised during this period. So at this point, you're going from you started civil, you went criminal, and now you're back to civil.
Yeah.
So did you think that you were at the end of the road here?
I definitely underestimated what was to come. Yeah, I didn't expect another year of stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was 14 months, and it would be fair to say that there was a particular target now on your back.
Yeah, felt like, yeah.
So if we move on, so we went into, and this is some of the content that we had coming in from HMRC. There's 2 slides here. So we've gone from there's an acknowledgement by Andy that his behaviour for most people will know that HMRC's penalties these days are behavioural based. And the fact that this was a prompted disclosure It was accepted that it was deliberate, and we were looking from 35% to a range of 35% to 70%. Now, the way that HMRC penalties work is that 35% is essentially the penalty for your behaviour up to that point, up to the point of your disclosure. So because for a prompted careless penalty that's not suspended, that would start at 15. A prompted deliberate concealed starts at 50. So the whole purpose is the worse your behaviour, the worse the penalty starts from. And then you would then have a range, and that range is then mitigated by the quality of your disclosure, telling, helping, giving. Now here, they've come straight at you with deliberate and concealed. Now for deliberate and concealed, the way of looking at it is you're looking at two acts. You're looking, firstly, there's the act of the deliberate behaviour, and for us, that act was the omission of income from VAT returns, also company returns or accounts, and then obviously incorrect pay-as-you-earn returns going in. And in our view, there was no concealment. No records were destroyed. Correct, Andre?
That's right.
Yeah, no records were destroyed. Nothing was destroyed. So what we've got there is we've got a situation, Andy, where we've got HMRC saying that there is concealment on this case. Now they're basically saying that you are removing entries on the tills by virtue of the tills, which wasn't correct because all the software showed the correct entries. And I think the most astonishing thing here is where the bottom sentence, where we have HMRC saying it is extremely unlikely for a deliberate, not to mention a deliberate and concealed inaccuracy, to receive full abatement. So I mean, that is just utter nonsense, because the whole purpose of it is your cooperation through. You made a disclosure in 11 days. There were subsequently, HMRC then said to us during this inquiry, civil inquiry, that you didn't make your disclosure in 11 days wasn't full and complete. It was only full and complete at the time our report went in. So the fact that you went in 11 days and made the disclosure but didn't give them all the figures precise to the penny, they were attempting to penalise you for that as well. So the next slide indicates another one where these are where you've got here two statements. Firstly, that they're saying that the concealment was the omission of wages from appropriate returns. So if that's the case, every pay-as-you-earn return or with irregularity is deliberate and concealed. Every tax return that I leave income off is concealment. And the problem that we have here is we have, and this is frontline HMRC civil compliance officers that we're having to deal with to educate who because this individual has gone to have been through criminal, they've looked at it and thought, well, if he's been looked at by criminal, it must be the worst behaviour, deliberate and concealed, without taking into account any of the facts. And here again we go on. Deliberate action was company was to divert cash from the business, accepted, but the omission of these additional earnings was to conceal from HMRC the true value of the earnings paid to employees. So we had a real battle on our hands trying to attempt HMRC to actually understand that there was no concealment. There was, if the concealment is, alteration of records, it's a subsequent act to conceal the first act. That's the way I look at it. So the way moving on, we had this is HMRC's opening position as we started this civil investigation. Aggressive in terms of that this was the CT that they claimed was due. Penalty they wanted at 55%. So again, here we have an individual that has engaged a specialist, has provided a full disclosure report. Everything is laid out in that report. HMRC's first letter to us is straight to penalties because they have all the facts available to them, but they still believe it to be, in that case, they've given you 55 deliberate conceal instead of 50. So they've increased it by 5%, and the 5% was because they said that it wasn't until the report went in that you made a full disclosure, so there was a delay. The final position on this, for CT purposes, as explained in the report, they didn't choose to read the parts of the report that they wanted. There was actually no CT due because the actual irregularities here were pay as you earn and NI, and obviously that's deductible in terms of gross salary for HMRC purposes. So there was actually a CT refund due, and there was no penalty. So straight away, a claim of 18 or 19,000 pounds by HMRC was reduced to 0, and that's purely because the opening position was incorrect. We then moved to VAT. The VAT claims was 12,484, and again that they wanted a penalty of 64%. So I'm struggling to see what the difference is between the quality of the disclosure CT, which was 55, and here we've got somebody saying, another officer looking at it saying 64. We ended up on this with, after independent review, remember Andre, we had to go to and get another officer to look at this case. They confirmed it, and we had no issue with the VAT. The VAT was it was to the penny as identified in our report, but there was no penalty. And the reason why there was no penalty was because when HMRC issued its explanation letter, the reason why there was the 64% was that HMRC had added an extra 10%, quoting Compliance Handbook 82465, which is an extra 10% for significant period. HMRC were claiming it took 3 years it was 3 years, wasn't it? And from them making from HMRC claiming that you made your disclosure. Now, what they're supposed to do, forgive me, what they're supposed to do is when they apply that restriction in the penalty explanation, HMRC has to include this wording when they want to do this restriction. And because they didn't do that and include this wording, the penalty was invalid. Now, then what then happens is when HMRC then come to make the penalty, to raise the penalty, because if you recall, we had assessments raised by HMRC on 13th of February 2018, those protective VAT assessments, they were now out of time because you have to raise penalties within 12 months or 12 months and 30 days of any appeal. And HMRC didn't, by the time they then realised that they'd made mistakes in their penalty explanations, by the time they then came to wanting to raise the penalties, they were out of time.
So they shot themselves in the foot.
Correct. And therefore they couldn't claim the penalties. The pay-as-you-earn opening position, there was 31,773 due. HMRC claimed this was higher than what we estimated, but the 5,302 was outside, including, or on top of that, was outside the statute of limitations because it was older than 6 years. Again, HMRC didn't raise protective determinations during the criminal investigation process, which meant that 5,302 fell out of time. We also had a situation here with the penalty where HMRC again was coming at 64% deliberate and concealed.
Okay, we have a question, Jan. What wording needs to be in a penalty schedule to allow HMRC to use the extra 10% for 3 years?
It's the wording that was on that previous slide.
Okay, so we will be sending out those.
Yeah, so if we I'll just go back. It's this wording here.
Walter says he didn't quite pick up the length of the period this behaviour had been going on.
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
So the closing position was 31,773, and the penalty was eventually accepted as being deliberate, and 35% was given. The reason why was because the HMRC were attempting to include this 10%, and the 10% only was introduced by HMRC on the 5th of September 16, and obviously in this case the initial disclosure was made on the 3rd of May 16. That was the letter that was sent by Andy, and on that basis, because he made that initial disclosure to HMRC, that was probably the best bit about you making that disclosure, because you beat the 5th of September change and you made your disclosure, albeit against advice. It meant that the 10% HMRC couldn't charge. So eventually they accepted that 35%.
So is the 3 years from the date you become aware of the underpayment, or is it from the year of assessment? What's the 3-year time?
Well, it's 3 years from the actual tax year.
Okay, Joe mentioned it's unusual, or is it unusual for HMRC to issue assessments during the course of a criminal inquiry? I think you mentioned that assessments were issued.
It's not. It's not unusual. As any in a case particularly where if you have deliberate behaviour, then HMRC always believe that they've got the 20-year limit, so they feel protected in that respect. But it's the main issue is the penalty side. When they raise the assessments, they've got that the issue that they have is the penalties, because they have to raise the penalties within 12 months of raising the assessments.
Okay.
But sorry, the national insurance is the one. The national insurance that's statute of limitations, and that has to be raised before the 6 year, otherwise that falls out of time.
Rebecca asked, if it was a deliberate disclosure which goes back 20 years, why do HMRC have to raise protective assessments going back 7 or 8 years for pay as you were?
Well, in terms of it's the NI.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So just some recaps on unannounced visits of what HMRC must do. The ones I'm particularly interested in here, Andy, if you look at the bottom two, do you recall any of those discussions?
No, not at all. As in, they didn't happen. I recall that they did not happen.
Okay. So these are these 6 bullet points are obligations that HMRC must perform, and I'm pretty sure if we were to look at the notes of that visit, they would be checked off.
Should they have said to me that I have a choice as to whether this visit can go ahead right now?
Yes. I mean, obviously, in terms of they should be pointed out to you, particularly because there is actually there is a part on the actual information notice that does say that. So again, Andy, do you want to just have a look at those 7 bullet points? So this is what they must not do.
Not make a person subject to the information notice.
And I've deliberately not shown you these because I'm interested in your reaction.
Make a person subject to the information notice. Comply. Make the person comply. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. They can't. They must not make you comply.
I've got to say, I felt made to. I didn't feel I had any choice in the matter. Forced entry. I mean, it wasn't forced entry, but it felt very imposed. I didn't feel I had any choice.
Freely conduct a search.
Conduct a search. No, they were searching as they felt fit. They were doing what they wanted. interview the person subject to the information notice or their staff. No, they were asking lots of questions to me and some to my team. Require a customer to cash up. No, they made us cash up with 2 people watching my manager cash up. So she was making mistakes. My manager was making mistakes while cashing up because of the pressure of it. Eventually, we got it, and it all added up, and it was absolutely fine. But just the pressure of a couple of people forcing her to, well, making her cash up in front of them was tough. Inspect cash unless the cash is trading stock. I'm not too sure what that means, but you know, cashing up involves counting cash and you know, counting the day's takings and counting the till float. So
and the last one won't be relevant in your
right.
in your particular circumstance.
No.
Right. So ending with some lessons from this case. Clearly, it'd be fair to say that your knowledge of unannounced visits, Andy, has considerably improved.
Now I would go about it completely differently. Yeah. I'd be on the phone to you even if it's 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. But I would say no, you can't come in. Please make an appointment, and I'm happy to talk with you. But no, I wish I knew in hindsight that I didn't have to sit there and take it.
And in terms of the disclosure that you made,
again, in hindsight, I feel in some ways like it was the right thing to do, just morally, to disclose, because that's what my instincts would have me do. But in hindsight, sometimes I question that wisdom. I still think it's the right thing to do, but I would just urge anybody listening never ever to disclose without professional counsel, because I don't believe HMRC will. I feel that the culture of HMRC is you're guilty before proven innocent, and I don't feel someone is in danger of making themselves a soft target if they disclose without having professional counsel. If I'd known in hindsight of the existence of a process called the Code 9 process,
yeah.
If I'd had a professional counsel at the time, I would have known about that, and things would have unfolded completely differently.
Where you could have made your disclosure under protection.
Yeah, exactly, where HMRC would have been kept in check.
The last bullet point is quite relevant because, by my estimations, the inquiry, we're looking at a 4-year inquiry. This inquiry would have cost HMRC, in my opinion, in excess of £200,000 to do this investigation, and the actual amount that was offered in December 16 as a settlement figure in the first report, ultimately HMRC would have collected more yield from that if they had settled civilly at that time.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, we have a number of questions we'll get through. Many of them around a theme of what more should the original accountant have done? Should they have done anything differently? Should they have known about it in advance? Should they have acted differently throughout?
In my view, I think the advice that the accountant gave was correct. I think the only thing that perhaps could have been explained is, clearly, if you have a client sitting in front of you where there is deliberate behaviour, then I think Andy would have felt a lot more, rather than speaking for you here, confirm if this isn't the case, but would you have not felt a lot more comfortable if I had been if I had your accountant on that day, on that Monday, the 25th of April 16, if you'd come to see me and I had told you there is a Code of Practice 9 process, Andy, where you can disclose deliberate irregularities under the protection of immunity from prosecution.
That would have been perfect.
Would you, if you'd been told that, would you have made that subsequent disclosure in the manner that you did?
No, I completely wouldn't. I had no idea when I made the disclosure that I was making myself subject to that I was making myself vulnerable to something. I just thought I was opening up the door to paying what was owed and to some penalties. I had no idea that I could be making myself subject to criminal prosecution or all the other kind of things that HMRC tried to escalate at every turn. I just had no idea that could happen.
So that would be the advice, Kevin.
Okay.
If you have a client with deliberate irregularities, whilst if you look at go back to the slide with the where the accountant did, it's pretty good, bar that one thing.
Okay, so we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so we need to be reasonably concise here. Is there a minimum amount for COP9?
No, there is not. In terms of voluntary requesting it, no, there is not.
Do HMRC have the right to refuse COP9?
Yes, but only in cases where I've only had it on a rejection once, and that was because, unbeknown to me, the actual client was under investigation for drug-related offences.
Okay. So if they can't interview the client at the inspection, what exactly can they do?
They can ask. There's a difference between asking questions to gain an understanding, to facilitate. I appreciate it's a grey line, and it's a difficult line for HMRC officers. But there's a difference, I think, between an interrogation and asking questions to get an understanding.
Okay. Do you think the accountant should have already spotted the deliberate acts by the client?
Well, I told him. I told him exactly what. Oh, I see. Spotted them before.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No. To be fair, I think that would have been very difficult because we are talking here 1% of the turnover.
How would you start a COP9 process if you're applying for it yourselves?
You apply using the form CDF1. It's downloadable off HMRC's website.
Okay. What if no records are available or no ledgers are maintained? What do you say to HMRC in response? Is it deliberate and concealed? No, the answer to that is just because there aren't any records there doesn't make it concealed.
No.
Concealed, you've got to have actually done something false, like a false invoice trail or something like that.
Yeah, I mean the way I look at it, it's almost like perverting the course of justice in terms of that it's a second act.
Have any complaints been made to HMRC in respect of their conduct throughout this inquiry?
I gave you names of people to write to, but I think what we're doing with this is, rather than complain, Andy has very kindly volunteered to put himself or make himself available to answer questions, Kevin. And I think this education process and explaining and getting the client to explain what it's like in this circumstance is more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, isn't it? That the purpose of this webinar isn't really the rights and wrongs of what went on in the business, it's the lessons that we learn as advisors in how to deal with HMRC.
Correct. Yeah.
And the pressures that the clients are under. And Andy is not unusual to feel that pressure at the hands of the revenue, let's be honest. Anne makes the point, to be fair, they've always disclosed for clients where they found an issue and got much reduced penalties as a result. She's not sure what the wisdom is of not disclosing.
No one's advocating not to disclose. It's the gateway and the manner in which you make that disclosure.
Yeah, I should have done it with legal counsel or with professional advice. I shouldn't have just done it off my own back, because I would have done it totally differently.
Okay, what are the AML implications for an accountant here, Mark?
You just made that up.
No, they've asked that.
You've got somebody to just said that.
So the money laundering implications, well, in general terms, Gary, if they come to you and they make a disclosure, you've got to disclose it. There's no two ways about it.
Well, if that's the question, I mean, the only if we're talking about a SAR, the only thing would be is there is an exemption if the client wishes to disclose in terms of then actually filing a suspicious activity report. That said, if a client comes to you wishing to make a disclosure, I would be astonished if our listeners wouldn't follow that through. The advice here is just the way in which you do that.
Keith makes the point they ran a similar case when HMRC had already decided on taking a criminal prosecution and would not talk to us until after the CPS had ruled out taking the prosecution further. So is that a point on legal privilege, do you think? Or
they're not. But the best advice I can give is that at the point where the HMRC officer submits his case to the CPS, there is an opportunity for that lawyer for representations to be made. Now, in Andy's case, Burnham Partners did do that. So in addition to the report, they made a submission. And also, I have to say that we had a number of my peers kindly agreed to do supporting letters saying that prosecuting this case would harm HMRC's disclosure process.
Feel free not to answer this one, but I've asked, could you please give an idea of how much fees you charged for this?
It was fair and proportionate. But what I would say to that on the basis,
I suppose, Andy, did you feel it was fair and proportionate?
It was more than I was expecting, but it was worth it in hindsight.
But what I would say is, he's by my side.
Yeah, but it was. It's worth pointing out in your defence that I think it was pretty much what I would have paid had we followed the Code 9 process.
Correct. Correct. I mean, the way I did it was the report was essentially Code Practice 9 report. So it served two purposes. It was one where I was hoping that the case would be converted into Code 9, and by then we'd already done the report.
There's a lot of support for your answer. My fees were fair and proportionate, Mark, it's true to say. Last few things with that. So if you have deliberate errors, you're more protected by using COP 9 than someone who's not done this deliberately. Surely this is backwards. So the point is, if you're deliberate, you can go and use COP 9 and you get more protection than if you've not done it deliberately.
Correct.
Yeah. Although the other side of that, Anne, of course, is that you haven't done it deliberately, you're not going to be going into the criminal prosecution.
No.
One of the main points of using COP 9 is to protect yourself from
prosecution. Yeah, you can only be prosecuted for deliberate behaviour or deliberate and concealed behaviour, not careless.
Okay, well, we'll draw to a close there. We're going to have some lunch. I would like sincerely to thank Mark and indeed Andy for coming along and sharing their thoughts with us and the experiences today. I'm sure you found that very useful. As I said earlier, it's not so much the point to the rights and wrongs of what went on. The point is the lessons that we learn from what actually happened to Andy. And I know one of the points Mark made was about letting clients know in advance, warning them their rights. I know something we feel quite strongly about at PFP is that clients are advised. We've written articles. I know our accountants have used. We've set up an independent helpline that they can phone any hour of the day, 24 hours a day, if the revenue turn up unannounced. So all things to help. So once again, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is one of a number of our webinars. I know many of you listen to every month. We will be joined again next month by John Cassidy, his Pearls of Wisdom. Meanwhile, if anybody's interested in joining our UK Tax Investigations Conference, the 10th year coming up this year, 9th of October, I believe, and I believe Mark is going to join us on that day as well as one of our presenters. So thank you very much for joining in. If anybody else have any queries, please send them in to us and we'll quite happily pass them on to Mark as quickly as we can. Thank you for listening and have a good day.